Welcome to We in Lewis, a podcast dedicated to celebrating the remarkable, creative, and energetic people who live in Lewis and are helping our community forge a collective soul as appealing as it is unique. These are their stories in their words. They are the We in Lewis. I'm your host, Kevin McGinnis. Our guest today is local artist Jennifer Wagner, who, from Bronze Anchor Studios, which she founded, works in sculpture, jewelry, and painting. Her route to being an artist was not a well-worn path. She seemed more on track for corporate America, armed with a degree from the University of California at San Diego and an MBA from Rice University, but shifted direction after studying at the Glassell School of Art in Houston, Texas. There she realized her true passion wasn't office reports and spreadsheets, but artistic creation, and we're fortunate she did. Today's episode is brought to you by our good friends at Lewis Cycle Sports. As many of you know, owners Megan and Brian Kelman were guests on this podcast. They own not just our town's local bike shop, but an institution in the community. As I know from personal experience, they take great care of everyone, from novices like me to bike gearheads who proudly parade around in bike shorts and shirts that are fuller of ads than the Blue Water House is full of art. They have everything bikes, rentals, bikes for sale, repairs, instruction, and gear. They've also organized hundreds of some of the coolest group rides on the East Coast, from the full moon ride that culminates with a beautiful view of the full moon over the Atlantic Ocean to the December Light Up the Night ride through Lewis, an unforgettable experience. Find out more via their website at lewiscyclesports.com. Jen, welcome to the podcast, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you. I think it's very ironic that the cycle store is sponsoring this. I don't know how to ride a bike.
Well, I'm sure they'd be happy to teach you.
Sorry. Well, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. We do have a vibrant art community here, and it's fun to get it out there and talk about it.
Why did you choose the name Bronze Anchor for your studio?
I wanted to have something that could change because I do a lot of different things in different mediums, and I wanted something that wasn't just painting or just jewelry or just sculpture. It would have been, so I wanted the studio in there in order to incorporate the fact that I do a lot of different things. And so as an overarching brand, if you will. And then we've always grown up around the water. My husband went to the Merchant Marine Academy, so anchors, and then bronze is one of my favorite mediums. It's just a cool metal.
Because there are not a lot of bronze anchors in maritime use, right?
No, typically not. Brass is more common. But also when you pour bronze, the structure of the device that you use to hold the crucible looks like a bar. And then when you tip it, it looks like a bar going into a vessel. So it almost looks like an anchor if you see an image of it. So that was how I got my logo.
Wow. Of all the different artistic mediums, which would you list first when describing your work?
So I always run into this because most shows require that you list a medium and you have to check, am I jewelry? Am I sculpture? But I would like to say just metalwork, because a lot of the things that I do don't really fall into the jewelry or the sculpture category because they are small. They could be worn, but they're more decorative and movable and little things you can play with.
Where does the inspiration come for your pieces?
So I have a beautiful house on the canal, and I'm very, very much attached to my front porch. And I have all kinds of stuff going on out there, and I love that. I love nature. I love the coastal area. I love the little birds and kind of all the activity that you see out there on a daily basis. That's definitely where I get a lot of my inspiration.
Does some of your work involve input and collaboration from an expected buyer?
Definitely. So I do a combination of things. I do have works that are for sale. If you think of it like the home builders who build a house and then it's out there on the market. I have works that are in process and then somebody comes and buys it and then has input into the way it's finished. And then I also have works that I create specifically for somebody with their complete input, and we make something that is just for them entirely out of their imagination and my creativity.
Most of us think of sculptures as being huge, heavy pieces that require trucks, cranes, and pedestals. Some of your sculptures can be held in your hand. Why is that?
So I grew up partly in the South, and I always had charm bracelets. And each of those charms is a tiny little sculpture. And I got so excited by that and the idea that you could have art that you could have and hold and carry, or you could have really cool desk gadgets and things that you could fiddle with. So I really got into the whole sort of downsizing and scaling down of art. And so I do paint little miniatures, and I do create and sculpt little things because I like to be able to touch them and feel them and have them and hold them. I'm like a little dragon or gremlin, I want to have my things. And I also like a lot of little things like birds and mice and the things that I sculpt. So they may be tiny, but they might be life-size.
Is it also easier to finish a small piece than a big piece?
Not necessarily. Because yes, I mean, time-wise, obviously, there's a tremendous amount of work that goes into the large sculptures. But when you have very small pieces with a lot of intricate detail, it can take a long time because each of the pieces, if it's a bronze piece, for example, I have a little box that has birds all the way around it. Each of those birds is hand-finished so that the right things are shiny, the right things are matte, the right things come out and are dark, and the right things are highlighted. And I can't remember, but I think it has 18 birds on it. So there's quite a bit of time that goes into that, even though that it is cast from a mold. It's a limited edition, but each one is hand finished. And then for a lot of the jewelry pieces, the sculptural pieces, every single little piece is hand sawn. So instead of having larger pieces that you can weld together, you end up having teeny tiny little bits that you solder together over a process of many, many days. Now, that said, part of the reason I started to go smaller was because I require a little bit more instant gratification. And so I did want to have things I could finish faster. But then I got into the detailed work and kind of bit myself in the butt.
How long did it take you to create the tribute to George H.P. Smith, which is located in the park named after him?
So from conception to completion, it was a little over 5 months, I believe. And part of that was definitely working closely with Mrs. Smith because she had some photos that she wanted to use specifically for it. And did a couple versions, one where he had glasses, one where he didn't have glasses. And just making sure that we got the proportions correctly for the bas relief so that when it's viewed at the right angle, it really does look three-dimensional and you can see George and recognize him.
Using the vernacular of people much younger than me, I believe there is an Easter egg in that particular piece. Is that true?
Yes. So when you sent me that question, I had to look up said vernacular. I like to hide a lot of little things in most of my pieces. And in that one in particular, his tie has baseballs in it on it because he was a baseball coach for years.
Let's say, hypothetically, Matt's family came to you because they wanted a bust of him to display at their house. Come on, listeners. Just trying to drop a few gift hints and help a guy out. What would be the process?
Well, I would definitely have to talk to the family and see what their vision was for its use. So if they want something that's going to hang on the wall, I'm going to treat that differently than something that's going to be a garden statue or a fountain, for example, with Matt as a merman with the tail of a fish. Just saying. So that would be a different process.
I'm ready to write the check right now.
Or I could do a painting. I could even do a painting of him as a merman. It doesn't, I do a lot of two-dimensional work. But yeah, so it would definitely be a collaborative effort to see what their vision for the quote-unquote use or display of it would be. And then from there, we would figure out what wouldn't tick him off too much.
I think for reasons it'll become more obvious later on. He would appreciate if he was he had the tail of a marlin.
Oh, okay. Little suspense there.
What led to your tongue-in-cheek takes on the works of artists like Grant Wood, Picasso, and Van Gogh?
So I'm assuming you're referring to the chicken paintings. So I come from a long line of people with a very good sense of humor, and I also grew up kind of all over the place going to these museums and seeing these works of art and seeing people appreciate but maybe not engage with. And when I started actually creating more art, I wanted people to engage with it in some way, shape, or form. And a lot of people do engage with other art, but I see like the people who go to the museums and see these formal paintings don't really get a whole lot out of it sometimes. My husband says he has museum feet, so he gets in and he goes for 10 minutes and then he's got to sit down. So I started taking some of these works from the great masters and changing them so that they would be chickens instead of people, but trying to intentionally incorporate a lot of the original artists, the things that made those paintings great. So in the one of Van Gogh, it's a portrait with bandaged ear. And so I tried to mimic the brushstrokes that he used, because that's part of what makes his work so cool, is he has the really intense brushstrokes and the depth to the actual paint itself, the layers of paint. And the dark colors were kind of atypical of a lot of the paintings at the time. And the other thing about that one, the reason I picked that particular one, is chickens don't even have external ears. So the bandage around the ear is a little bit superfluous. This all kind of came about because when we first moved up here, Jeff got a job with Mount Air, the chicken company. And so that was one of the just random creative things I started making for him to decorate his office. And then it caught on because people really kind of liked him. So that was, and then the Grant Wood one is the American Gothic. And it's actually named that not because of the way people are standing or because they're so solemn or anything. It's the Gothic style window behind them. So I made sure to keep that window very intact. And then if you look at the original, the woman is wearing a pin that has that has a child on it. So my chicken is wearing a pin that has a chick on it. So trying to incorporate those little details or Easter eggs, if you will, so that somebody who really understood the art could also interact with it, but somebody who didn't would be amused by it.
Not everyone would paint a self-portrait where the artist is depicted as a chicken. I'm guessing there's a therapist or two out there who hear that and tilt their heads and mumble, interesting.
I would guess so too. My undergraduate degree was in psychology and human development, and I still don't understand it. Chickens, they're just like us.
Personally, I love your ornaments for the tops of weather vanes. Are you still making those?
So I do, and I do them both. I have crane or herons that are available, but I also do custom ones. So I've done a big ship, and a couple other ones. Those tend to be bronze. That is what works best and people request, and then they tend to be big. So I only do one or two of those a year.
What led to your creating a line of celestial-themed earrings?
So I have other things that are celestial as well. I have all kinds of things, but the earrings, in particular, I think the ones you're referring to have the storm cloud with the lightning bolts. The sky is just a fascinating thing. The clouds have shapes and they move, and I like to do things that are two-toned and metals, and you've got all kinds of colors in the stars, and you've got the white of the moon and the yellow of the sun, or the white of the clouds and the yellow of the lightning, and those lend themselves to metal. And the other thing is that I've been fortunate to see some really spectacular celestial events. So in 2017, we went to Jackson Hole to see the lunar eclipse, and we actually went up on ATVs and went up into the Tetons, and we're able to see a 360-degree sunset and see the stars come out in the middle of the day and feel the temperature drop about 30 degrees and actually experience 4 minutes of the total eclipse. So that was really, really special. So things like that are definitely what inspired me, and I find that a lot of people really do gravitate towards the celestial pieces. They identify with them. The other thing that I like is that everything in the sky moves. Even if it's predictable, it moves. And so a lot of those pieces do rotate or have elements of them that move.
Is your studio in your home?
Yes, my studio is, I have a very tolerant husband, although he did kind of win out of the deal, but not really. My studio is the bottom half of the bottom of my house. It's in what used to be the formal living dining room. So right as you walk in the door, you can go to the right into the actual kitchen and what is now the dining room, or you can go to the left and go into my studio, which used to be the formal living dining room. I have a beautiful fireplace, and I have all my tools and everything set up, and then I have an area where I can meet with clients that is normally covered in crap because most artists are not neat people. But that's why I say my husband won, because now all of the projects are in that room instead of having like the painting on the back table and the wax on the kitchen table and the, I don't even know. Now everything's in that one room. So the rest of the house stays clean. But that room, he just doesn't go in.
Well, I assume you did it for the light. Is that right?
I did. I did it for the light. I did it to take advantage of the front windows, and I did it because it does have doors that shut off, and it's the furthest from any of the bedrooms that we use. So I am a bit of a night owl, and I will be working on stuff and grinding on stuff late into the night. I typically wake up around 2 a.m. and am very productive until about 7, and then I might take a nap. I might not. And being in that side of the house in that room and able to shut the doors helped my family.
In a couple of days, Saturday, September 20th to be exact, you're going to be part of the Lewis Artists Studio Tour, where people can see your studio. I believe the tour is free. Is that right?
The tour is free, yes. And there are 16 artists on the tour. It's a self-guided tour. You can go online to
lewisartiststudiotour.com.
That one. So you can go online to lewisartiststudiotour.com and see the artists and see the map. And you can pick and choose, or you can try to visit as many studios as you want, or you can just choose the neighborhoods that you want to try to live in and go visit the houses.
Can people buy things?
Absolutely. All of us will have stuff for sale at the studio tour. It's also a great opportunity to kind of see how the artists work, what their creative process is, and forge connections. If you want to have something made going in the future, you can do that as well.
Now, for those who are going to visit your studio, what should they look for?
Try to find the mouse that's out by the docks, and then appreciate the fact that it's clean while it's clean, because it won't last. I'll spend the next 6 weeks trying to find everything that I have, quote, put away, unquote, and pull out all the projects that I was working on. And then, so take it all in. And then when you come back to work on your custom piece, just know that I will at least have a clean chair for you to sit on. But that might be it. But I think another thing that I have that's really cool is I do have all of my tools available to see.
What is an arbor press?
So an arbor press is a manual, something you can pound metal with. That's the simplest way, although my nephews used it to squish a tennis ball. It works on leverage. So you have a handle and you have a very large weight that can press things. You can use it to crush tennis balls, or you can use it to press patterns into metal, shape metal, things like that. So I have that, and then I have the hydraulic press, which uses a hydraulic piston to do the work for you. So it's much more powerful.
In November, you're hosting what I believe is your 4th holiday market in the Villages of 5 Points. What led to this annual event?
So given that we are such a small artistic community, we kind of all know the opportunities that are around, and we know the organizations and when they have their shows. And several years ago, 4, there was a turnover at one of the organizations that often holds a holiday market. And many of the artists that normally got into it, some who had gotten into it for 15, 20 years in a row, did not get in. And so there were a number of people who were stranded. And so, once again, I have that combination of intelligence, ignorance, and creativity, I guess. And I said, well, I can do that. So we started to put together our own holiday market. And we attracted a number of incredible artists and filled a place that there was a void. So we tried to fill it. And then we started one in the spring as well, because there was a jewelry trunk show that was held the weekend before Valentine's Day. And they stopped doing that. So I picked that one up as well. And so our holiday market will be on November 8th at the Villages of 5 Points. And it's free admission, free parking, all kinds of stuff. And we have 41 artists currently signed up from the Delmarva Peninsula and around. And we'll have a big heated outdoor marquee tent this year. We're growing. It's kind of exciting to see how much it's grown over the years.
I know you didn't grow up in Lewis. Where did you grow up?
So that's kind of an interesting story. I kind of grew up a little bit everywhere. My dad was in the energy industry, and I went to 12 different schools before I graduated from high school. So I started in Houston.
You literally moved every year?
No, I moved twice a year, a couple times, because I went to high school for 3 years in the same place.
You got very adept at making friends, is that right?
Yes and no. So yes, I can make friends quickly, but it actually, I wasn't very good at managing conflict until much later because I never had to, because I knew if I got pissed off at somebody, I could just leave.
You might not be able to hear on this recording, but
Sorry.
Steve had a very similar experience, and he actually laughed himself off his chair at that one. I believe, though, in all of this, you had kind of the dream senior year of high school for every young person I've ever known.
I did, but I didn't know it at the time. I didn't take advantage of it at the time.
Oh, come on.
So my parents, my dad was transferred again. So he actually moved and became a resident. And they were in Moscow and then in Dubai. Or I'm sorry, the other way around. They were in Dubai and then they went to Moscow. And in order to keep my California residency, stay my senior year at the same school, all that, that stuff, I did have an apartment on my own in Pasadena for most of my senior year. My mom came back and forth, but it was pretty much just me. And at the time, I didn't take advantage of that, if you will, because I was very much a goody two-shoes.
Steve, did you luck out and have that same experience?
No, not as great as hers. I spent the last 3 months of high school living with a woman that I worked with because my family had already relocated to New Jersey. So nowhere near as adventurous as Dubai and Moscow. But yeah, I was on my own for the last 3 months, graduated from high school, and 2 days later moved to New Jersey.
Yeah, it doesn't sound as exciting.
Yeah.
It's actually living by yourself.
So I graduated from high school in LA, and then about a week later, I moved down to San Diego because I was going to start at UCSD, which was another reason I stayed to keep my California residency, in-state tuition.
Right. What led you to UC San Diego other than the beauty, perfect weather, good education, and tuition economics?
Well, gee, when you put it like that. So, yes, I did love the campus, but having been all over the world, UCSD has a really neat program. They're a massive campus. They have 24,000, or at the time, they had 24,000 undergraduates. And they divide them into 5 different colleges. Now I think it's 6, maybe even 7. And each college sort of has its own character and its own undergraduate requirements, things like that. And so the one that I went to was called Eleanor Roosevelt, and it specialized in this idea of like a global citizen. And there's a 2-year long required course. So it ends up being, I have to count on my fingers, sorry, 8 different semesters or 8 terms, I guess, I don't know how they split them up, of this class called The Making of the Modern World. And it's a history class that goes from sort of the dawn of civilization all the way up until the time when I went to school, the mid-'80s. And so it wasn't that modern at that point, but it was fascinating to learn about how the world fit together, all these puzzle pieces, and to see history play out in this timeline that you could overlap and you could realize the things that were happening in different parts of the world at the same time that I had never put together. It's not really well put together in our high school history classes and things like that, where you can say, okay, well, while this was happening in Europe, this was happening in Asia. While this was happening in China, this was happening in India, and actually put those timelines against each other and realize what was happening in the world. And then synthesize that all down to see, okay, why do people interact the way that they do today? And why do we have so much conflict in certain areas of the world? And a lot of it goes back to the way that other conflicts were handled at different times. So that was fascinating to me, because having lived in Europe and having seen the results of a lot of those massive world conflicts, to understand that a little more was really, really eye-opening. And so I went into UCSD knowing they had that program, and that was one of the big things that appealed, in addition to the perfect weather and the in-state tuition. And I did live on my own in an apartment there. I didn't live on campus because I had to keep my California residency. And if you're a dorm resident, then you're not actually living in California. So that was another added benefit, is that I kind of got to extend my freedom.
Did you then go directly to Houston to get your master's?
I did. And at the time, I was one of the youngest people that Rice accepted into the MBA program. The reason I picked that MBA program was because they have a real world learning experience. That's sort of an immersive program where for the second half of your first year, you work within a company in Houston and you have a project to complete, and you do that with a team. So you get some work experience at the same time that you're getting your degree, because I knew I would be at a slight disadvantage, because although I did work during college, I didn't have that experience going in that a lot of people have coming into business school.
But this is you went basically from a very specific liberal arts undergraduate degree to an MBA. What led to that decision?
So the undergraduate degree that I have is in human development and organizational behavior. And I could do one of two things with that. I could have done a lot of things, but I personally could have done one of two things with it. I could have gone to SeaWorld and been a trainer, or I could have gone to business school and worked in human resources and trained people. And the
wait a minute. You got a degree in psychology, right?
Yes.
And that is something that SeaWorld looks for?
So obviously we're not analyzing the character of the dolphins or assessing their trauma, but the operant conditioning and the sort of the way that we set up experiments and the way that we learn about how to get animals to do what you want, that's all things that are very valuable for the trainers to know.
And that didn't interest you?
I don't like being cold, and the water is kept at like 60 degrees. So really what it came down to was I wanted to get a graduate degree, and I did not want to have to write a thesis, and I wanted to do it in as short a period of time as possible. So business school, 2-year program, no thesis, wham, bam, thank you, Rice, and I'm out and hopefully can get a job. And that was my thought process at the time, which I will say, looking back on that was a flawed thought process.
So you get your MBA.
Yeah.
But then you went into the Glassell School of Art.
Years later, yes.
Well, that was years later. Yeah. So what did you do then in the interim?
So the year after I got my MBA, I was working at the University of Texas Health Science Center in Houston, and I was in their development office, which basically means I was begging for money. After that, about a year into that, my husband got transferred. I met him at Rice, by the way. Aside from my degree, he's the best thing I got there, because I don't use my degree now, but I still use him. He knows I tease him about that all the time. Yeah. We both have our degrees hanging in the hallway. He is currently the CSO of a company at the University of Texas Health Science Center in Houston. Got to put on a couple of really fun galas. We did rent the... I guess we didn't rent them. I think UT owns them. They have a herd of longhorns, and we brought them out and put them on the River Oaks Country Club lawn for one of our fundraisers. So that was nice. And then shortly thereafter, my husband got transferred and we moved to Budapest. So that started another chapter where we were moving again, because he was in the energy industry at that time. And so we went to Budapest, and then we went to Paris, and then although technically still a, quote, resident, unquote, of Paris, he went to Nigeria and Ghana, and I had come back to Houston because at the time I was pregnant, and my parents had come back to Houston.
Was it when he was transferred to Hungary, to Budapest? Did you know Hungarian?
No, very few people do. Hungarian's a dead language. Only about 16 million people in the world speak it, but it's really cool. It's not actually related to any other living language. So although I did volunteer at the senior center and learned how to count to 75 in Hungarian because we would play bingo with them, that's about all I got.
But what is the second language, or the language most people use there, in addition to Hungarian?
So it would actually be Russian, but a lot of people did speak English. At that time, it was in 2008. And the last soldier of the Red Army didn't leave until 2001. So they were still very much almost 30 years behind the rest of the world. The impact of being behind the Iron Curtain was very much still there. So it was really neat to see a society come alive, because we were right there sort of at their renaissance.
And then you went from Budapest, which was just coming out of the Soviet bloc, and you went to Paris,
yes,
which is sort of the polar opposite in terms of culture and language and so on, I'm assuming.
Very much so. But oddly enough, I did not enjoy Paris as much. You hear all the time about the Parisians. It's not the Parisians. It's the complication of living in a large international city, which you would think Budapest was, but at the same time, it wasn't. It still felt very small. In Paris, instead of having a huge park outside of our door, I had a alley and then like another apartment building and then another and then another and then another. And I had two big dogs at the time. I was married, but my husband was in Brazil, so it doesn't count. So I had two big dogs at the time, and nobody appreciates big dogs, even though they're well trained and they would sit when I would come to a stop and things like that. The little dogs that were all around would yap incessantly and try to bite my dogs. And then I would get dirty looks from these very well-dressed Parisian women. And here I was in my jeans and my t-shirts with my two big dogs who were perfectly well behaved, just getting scowled at all day. And God forbid I actually pick up my dog poop.
While you were living in these two locations, did it start awakening your artistic interests?
I think it did in a lot of ways, because I couldn't work because I didn't have a work visa. But I got involved with the American Women's Association, and I ended up doing their newsletters and their coordinating their book that they put out. They used to put out in Budapest on sort of how to survive and navigate and what things are there and what are American-friendly things, and everything from where to go get your nails done to where to buy a birthday cake. And so doing that was a creative outlet, and it also introduced me to a lot of people. And a lot of the women over there did creative things because they, like me, couldn't get a work visa. And that, and coupled with the fact that there's just so much public art in Europe. And it brought me back to what I had seen growing up, and the museums and the sculptures. And you go to Bratislava, and even the manhole covers are beautifully decorated bronzes where it looks like a guy's creeping out of the sewer. I mean, there's all kinds of fun stuff. And they have a way of making, Paris especially, has a way of making utilitarian things exceptionally beautiful. And that was inspiring.
And you mentioned but all of this is going on. Your husband's in another country.
Yes.
And
I'm getting yelled at by the Parisian women. Yes.
Getting yelled at by the Parisian woman. But you came back to the States because your daughter was going to be born. Is that right?
Yes. So the American hospital in Paris. Now, I don't want to offend anybody. Remember, this was, 16 years ago. She's going to be 16. She's going to be driving. Oh, my God. This is a public service announcement. Please clear the roads. So 16 years ago, the American hospital in Paris was supposed to be the fusion of the best of French and American medicine. And while they took our insurance, they didn't take any form of credit card or anything else as copayments. You had to pay cash. And the Parisians definitely have different takes on modesty and bedside manner than Americans. And I was not impressed. Well, the first advice that the obstetrician gave me was to try to keep my wine consumption down to 1 glass a day. And so then I said, well, I have questions. And he said, that's fine. You're fine. I was like, okay. So I ended up coming back to Houston to visit my parents and going to a doctor in Houston and discovering some issues that were going on. And then we decided that it was better if I moved back to Houston because at that time, Jeff was actually being transferred to Nigeria.
In 2011, your life changed. Could you share what happened?
Sure. So at that point, we were back in Houston. And Houston is about an hour and a half away from Galveston. And so my husband had finally achieved one of his dreams of owning a boat. And he, having gone to the Merchant Marine Academy, boats were a big part of his life. He's always very safe. This was a new boat, though. And we took it out, and we had friends with us. And on the way back, the boat veered, and I was thrown into the gunnel, the wall of the boat. And I was holding my daughter, and thankfully she was fine because I kept my hold on my daughter. And therefore, I didn't have any way to brace myself. So I hit face first into the wall of the boat, fractured the cheekbone, the occipital orbit, and had a massive concussion. That really did change a lot of the day-to-day stuff for me because the word recall was no longer there. That next morning, I remember going to a restaurant I'd been to hundreds of times, looking up at the wall, seeing the menu, knowing that those were letters and knowing that they should make sense, but they actually didn't make any sense. Thankfully, I was able to regain that, but it definitely impacted the ability to sort of maintain a line of thought or word recall, vocabulary, things like that. I have successfully regained very much of that, and I'm very, very grateful for that. But it did change the way that I was able to work or, use a computer, things like that. I knew I wasn't ever going to be able to go back to a professional career, if you will. So I picked a different professional career and became a full-time artist.
With this accident, did it impact how you could see?
So initially, well, in 2 ways, yes. So initially there was blood inside of the right eyeball, and then which caused a kind of a haze. That cleared, but just recently, so 11, 12 years later, I ended up having cataract surgery because the scarring caused an early cataract in that eye. And that has taken away a lot of the kind of detailed near vision. So now when I work, I look like a little dentist. I have my little things that fold down over my glasses and magnify everything for me.
Do they look sort of like those eyepieces you see on special ops movies, the night vision goggles that
They're
they can bring?
They're definitely not that cool, no.
Okay.
But I do have a little forehead light attached to them, which is good because I forget that I have them on and then I make eye contact with people and blind them. So I don't know. It's like I have a laser on my forehead.
You've had this accident. You're in recovery. You're in therapy. You realize you can't operate in an office anymore as you had expected. Did that create an opportunity for look to something else?
It did. And I didn't appreciate it at the time, but it definitely did. I had always sort of in the back of my mind thought I would go back to work after my daughter was born and I was back in the States. And then not really being able to do that as fluidly as I had initially thought I would. I started looking for other things to do as she got into school, and she was busy and my husband was traveling and I was kind of on my own. So I had gone to the Museum of Fine Arts and saw an advertisement for the Gliselle School, and they had a sculpture program. And I thought, well, that's kind of cool. That's kind of what I've always been interested in. I love little sculptures and things like charm bracelets, and I wanted to learn how to make those things. And so I, not knowing any better, sometimes ignorance is great for courage. It's easily confused. I went and I applied.
And I assume that if you you did get accepted, but you were not the normal student they got. Is that right?
Not at all. No, I was older and I was not an art major in any way, shape, or form, having never actually taken an art class. I happened to get very lucky, and when I did interview, I ended up unknowingly interviewing with the head of the sculpture department. And for whatever reason, he saw something there in my, I had to put together a portfolio of art projects that I'd completed to show him. And, I managed to do it. And I realized, I actually I've been doing art for a long time, just not in a professional way, or not in a, even the best tennis player has a coach, right? So yes, I was artistic, but I had never had a coach. And so he saw something there. So he actually let me in, accepted me into the sculpture program.
Did you have to quickly learn a bunch of things that you might have known if you had been an art major?
Definitely. There was definitely a learning curve. However, we were all there to learn the process of the sculpture making, not the actual artistry of the sculpture making. So you got there because you could make art. You were there to learn, okay, once I have my thing, here's how I put it into the ceramic shell. Here's how I burn out the wax. Here's how I mix the ceramics. Here's how I set the kilns. Here's how I do this. Here's how how hot I have to heat the bronze to pour it. Here's what the alloy that we use is. We use a silicone bronze. Here's the whole process. And so learning the process, it was new to all of us.
One of the things I just find fascinating about your story is there's a certain fearlessness in you, in that you switch gears and you go into something that you find fascinating, but you don't really know much about, and you just seem to handle it in stride.
So like I said, that confidence coupled with the ignorance is a very powerful force. So yeah, I think I definitely have the mentality that, I could do that. I destroyed my bathroom in one of my old houses because I said, I can put it back together, and I did. And could somebody else have done it better? Probably. Did I do it well? Yeah. So that's kind of been my mantra. I figure, why be afraid?
What was the first piece of art you sold?
The first show that I actually did was the Fine Art and Crafts show in Palm Beach, Florida, which by all intents and purposes, again, is another thing I should never have gotten into. It's a very big, well-known show that brings together incredible artists from across the U.S. and some internationally. And so I went down there and set up my little table and probably looked like a complete amateur. But I sold a necklace to a lady who was really impressed with the way that I had sculpted, because I had sculpted the beads that became links to the chain. They were each individually sculpted. And that was one of the first things that I ever sold.
That must have been sort of validating for you. Is that right?
Oh, yeah. Oh, of course. Seeing people, aside from friends and family, look at something that I made and say, that's good. Like, that's an incredible feeling. Just like, when people who you don't know listen to the podcast and say, oh, wow, that's good.
Often with that degree of surprise in their voice. How did you get to Lewis?
My husband was born and raised in Milford.
Really?
Yeah. So his dad, Dr. Wagner, was a doctor in Milford and Milton for over 40 years. And he did leave to go to college at the Merchant Marine Academy and then come back to Rice for business school and then come home. So although we lived in Houston and Budapest and Paris and all those things, it was always our intent to come back to Delaware. And I joke that, he was born and raised here. I'm an import because eventually that family tree has got a branch. Braiding is bad. You want a wreath. You don't want a wreath. You want a tree. Yeah.
You've lived around the world. You've
Yep.
lived in and gone to school in states far better known for their beauty than Delaware. But what is it about this town that makes you feel like this was the place to start an art business?
Well, this was the place that we wanted to grow old. My husband grew up taking his little boat up and down the canal and, always saw the houses on Pilot Town Road and always thought he wanted to have one. And when we had the opportunity, we jumped at it. And so hearing the way that he would talk about Lewis and then seeing it as we came over the last 2.5 decades, coming and visiting and watching it, for me, 2.5 decades, for him, his whole life. And then he went to high school with Abraxas, and he went to high school with Paul Kamenish, who is Heidi Lowe's husband. So we knew artists in the community already. We knew what it had to offer, and we wanted that. It was very appealing.
When Heidi was a guest on this show, she mentioned that one of the biggest challenge for artists is to understand they can do business.
Yes.
You had an MBA.
Yes.
Was the business kind of the easier part?
Yes, I could put together a company. Yes, I could understand pricing and how to do that. But at the same time, not having, that was never the real part of my brain or my passion. But definitely helped because I did know it could be a business because again, there's that confidence and ignorance combination. I feel like people say oftentimes that their ducks are in a row, but I feel like I don't have ducks. I have squirrels, and they're at a rave. They are definitely not in a row.
We've repeatedly said on this podcast that Lewis has an inappropriate number of interesting and creative people, especially for a town of 3,800, if you count pets. Is it something in the water? Is it a vibe? What is it?
Well, I think it's a combination. I think, you say that there are other states that have a more beautiful, that are known for their beauty or things like that, but it really is difficult to compare to the gardens around Lewis, the small town appeal, the atmosphere. And the fact that it is small means that you can get to know people. And once you get to know people, you can create things that appeal to them. Being in a small community, you see other people doing it and you say, oh, I could do it too. And you get to know other people who are doing it and you get to see them doing something that makes them happy. So you start to think, well, or at least I start to think, well, I could do something that makes me happy. And then the next thing you know, you've inspired somebody else. So being in that small community allows that mentality to flourish. And per capita, we probably do have more creative people because we do know each other. We have a great support network here. And we have programs like the Developing Artist Collaboration and things like that in the area. And also, it is a beautiful place.
Jenn, thanks again for joining us. Remember, if you want to see Jenn's studio or learn more about her art, take advantage of the Lewis Artists Studio Tour on Saturday, September 20th. Admission is free, and you can find out more about the time and locations by visiting lewisartistsstudiotour.com. And thanks to Lewis Cycle Sports, the go-to place for cycling fun in our region. You can find out more on their website at lewiscyclesports.com, all one word. Don't forget to keep an eye out for their tours and events.
You might see me there getting lessons.
Thank you for listening. We hope you had a wonderful, memorable summer, and don't forget, this is one of the best times to visit Lewis. Think spring without pollen. Have a great week, and if you're here in Lewis, come check out our recording studio, cleverly hidden at Kindle Restaurant. The search is more fun with a drink. Till next time, this has been We in Lewis, the podcast.